There is a farm in Bavaria that no longer exists. Not because it burned down. Not because it collapsed with age. It was torn apart, stone by stone, board by board, until nothing remained but bare earth. The people who lived there wanted it gone. The people who visited it could not sleep afterward. And the man who owned it, a simple farmer named Andreas Gruber, spent the final days of his life doing something he had never done before. He listened to the attic. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck. 6 people died there in 1922. Their killer was never found. And the clues left behind are so strange, so deliberately unsettling, that a century later, investigators still argue about what actually happened inside that farmhouse in the days before the murders. Stay until the end, because the detail about the maid is the one that keeps this case awake at night. Hinterkaifeck was not a village. It was a single, isolated farmstead, sitting alone in the Bavarian countryside near the small town of Wangen, roughly 40 miles northwest of Munich. There was no neighboring house within shouting distance. The nearest settlement was a walk away through open fields and a stretch of forest. If you screamed at Hinterkaifeck, no one would hear you. The farm belonged to Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, a stern and deeply unpopular man in the region. He lived there with his wife, Kazilia, 62. Their household also included their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, and her 2 children, 7-year-old Kazilia, named after her grandmother, and 2-year-old Joseph. There is something worth pausing on here. Victoria's husband had died in the First World War. But rumors in the area whispered that Joseph, the 2-year-old boy, was not the son of her dead husband. Rumors said the father was Andreas Gruber himself, Victoria's own father. Whether the rumors were true has never been confirmed. But they were persistent enough, and ugly enough, that Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm to begin her job. She unpacked her belongings. She met the family. And that evening, she too would hear something that made her uneasy enough to mention it before bed. None of them would leave that house again. For several days, no one from Hinterkaifeck came into town. No one thought much of it at first. The family kept to themselves, and isolation was normal for a farm that size. But when Victoria's daughter failed to show up for school, and when nobody from the household appeared at church, neighbors began to grow concerned. On April 4, 1922, a small group of local men decided to walk out to the farm and check on the family. What they found has become one of the most quietly horrifying crime scenes in European history, not because of gore on display, but because of its eerie, deliberate order. In the barn, they found 4 bodies, stacked together beneath a layer of hay. Andreas Gruber. His wife, Kazilia. Their daughter, Victoria. And Victoria's 7-year-old daughter, little Kazilia. All 4 had been killed with a ryuthicon, a mattock, a farming tool with a pickaxe-like blade, normally used for breaking up soil. Investigators would later determine that the little girl had not died instantly. According to the state of the body, she appeared to have survived the initial attack, only to die later, alone in the dark barn beneath the hay, likely from suffocation or blood loss, without anyone coming to help her. It is, to this day, one of the most disturbing single details in the entire case. Inside the farmhouse, the searchers found 2 more victims. The infant, 2-year-old Joseph, killed in his crib. And the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, the woman who had started her job less than 24 hours earlier, killed in her room upstairs. 6 people. 1 farm. No survivors. But here is where the case turns from a tragedy into something almost impossible to comprehend, when investigators examined the scene and the timeline. They determined that the murders had actually taken place several days before the bodies were found, likely on the last day of March or the very first day of April. That meant, for those following days, the killer, or killers, did not simply flee the farm. They stayed. Evidence in the house suggested that someone had continued living there after the family was dead. The animals had been fed. Meals had been prepared and eaten in the kitchen. Smoke had been seen coming from the chimney by a passing mail carrier, smoke that meant a fire had been lit, days after the murders, inside a house full of corpses. Someone had walked those halls, past the room where the maid lay dead, past the crib where an infant had been killed, and calmly made themselves dinner. This detail alone has fueled a century of theories. Was the killer someone who knew the family so well that staying on the property felt natural? Someone hiding from the outside world rather than fleeing it? Was it someone who had nowhere else to go? Or was it something closer to ritual, someone who wanted, for reasons never understood, to remain among the dead? Local investigators at the time, along with criminologists who later studied the case using early profiling techniques, leaned toward one uncomfortable theory: the killer was not a stranger. The killer knew the household. The killer possibly knew exactly which family member the 2-year-old, Joseph, truly belonged to. And the killer may have had a very personal, very specific motive buried in the family's private history. More than 100 suspects were investigated over the following decades. Neighbors. Distant relatives. Even Victoria's presumed lover, rumored to be involved in the paternity of her son. Confessions were made and later disproven. Exhumations were conducted as recently as the 2000s using modern forensic science, hoping DNA might finally answer the question. It didn't. The Bavarian police officially closed the case. In 2007, Unsolved, citing insufficient evidence to pursue any single suspect after all potential leads had died with the decades. No weapon signature. No surviving witness. No confession that held up. Just a mattock, a farmhouse, and a killer who calmly lived among 6 corpses for days before disappearing into history. Return, for a moment, to Andreas Gruber, in the weeks before his death. The footprints leading to the house and nowhere else. The strange newspaper. The unfamiliar keys. And the footsteps in the attic, footsteps he heard on more than one occasion, footsteps that led him upstairs to find absolutely nothing. There is a theory, one of the most chilling in the entire case, that the killer was not a single night's intruder. That the killer had been living in that attic, quietly, for days or even weeks before the murders took place. Watching the family. Learning their routines. Waiting. If that theory is correct, then Andreas Gruber's instincts were right the entire time. Someone truly was walking above his head in the dark. He simply never looked in the right place, or perhaps he did look, and simply never lived to tell anyone what he found. The farmhouse itself stood abandoned for years after the murders, drawing the curious and the reckless from nearby towns, until in 1923 it was finally demolished completely, torn down to its foundation, the materials reportedly repurposed elsewhere, as though the town itself wanted to erase the building from the earth. Today, a memorial cross stands quietly on the empty field where Hinterkaifeck once stood. No house. No barn. Just open land, and a marker for 6 names. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain, to this day, one of Germany's most infamous unsolved crimes. No arrest. No trial. No definitive answer to who walked those halls after the family died, or why they chose to stay. What we're left with is a set of details too specific to be comfortable and too incomplete to be solved. Footprints that lead somewhere. They shaped how the community viewed the family. Hinterkaifeck was not just isolated by geography. It was isolated by reputation. The Grubers were not liked. Andreas was known as difficult, controlling, and quick to anger. He had, according to locals, mistreated a previous maid so badly that she left the position and refused to speak about why. In March of 1922, a new maid arrived to replace her, a young woman named Maria Baumgartner. She would last exactly 1 day. Part 2, The Signs. In the weeks before the murders, strange things began happening around the farm. Andreas Gruber mentioned them to neighbors, almost in passing, the way a man does when he is unsettled but doesn't want to admit it. He told people he had found footprints in the snow. Footprints that led from the edge of the forest, across the field, directly to the farmhouse. And then, nothing. The footprints did not lead back. Whoever made them had walked to the house and simply vanished, as if they had gone inside, or as if they had never needed to leave at all. Andreas searched the barn. He found a newspaper on the property that did not belong to his family, one nobody could explain. He found a set of keys, unfamiliar keys, lying on the ground near the house. And then, most disturbing of all, he began to hear footsteps. Not outside. Above him. In the attic. Night after night, he heard someone walking across the attic floorboards, slow and deliberate, in a part of the house that should have been empty. He went up to check more than once. Each time, there was nothing there. No sign of entry. No sign of anyone at all. A man less proud than Andreas Gruber might have left. He might have taken his family into town, or asked for help, or slept somewhere else until the unease passed. He did none of those things. Farmers in that era did not abandon their land over footprints and sounds. He stayed. His family stayed with him. On the last day anyone would see them alive, the new maid. And nowhere. An attic that was never truly checked. A killer who ate breakfast in a house full of bodies, then vanished without a trace, taking the truth with them into the next 100 years. If you found this story unsettling, you're not alone. True crime historians still call it one of the most disturbing unsolved cases in European history, precisely because of how ordinary and quiet the horror was. Not a monster in the dark. Just footsteps in an attic that shouldn't have been there. Subscribe for more real, unsolved horror stories from around the world, because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't the ones we invent. They're the ones that actually happened, and were never explained.